Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Hogue Deka revision number 2. First off though, in the name of full disclosure, I gotta let you know that Hogue Knives reached out to me, said, "Hey Nick, we know you like the original Deka, we've made some tweaks. You interested?" I said, "Yes, absolutely I am." But I told him, as always, I'm gonna talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. Might be a gem, it might be junk, they did still send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. Here it is against the Spiderco Delica. And what we see here is not a particularly large knife. Here it is against the Spiderco PM2. What we see here is it's a little big in the Delica, but not as big as the PM2. Again, not a particularly huge knife. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. So again, yeah, it's a moderately sized knife. And again, more sharpened edge than either the Delica or the Rat 2. And actually, here it is from next to one of my other favorites from Hogue. This is the Doug Ritter Mini RSK Mark 1 G2, I think. Either way, it's the Mini RSK. So, and what we see here is that this guy feels a little bit bigger than the Mini RSK, but it's not that much bigger. In terms of sharpened length, they are very, very close to one another. Then I'll go on ahead and I will measure it up real quick, and we're going to see this guy comes in just over 3 inches worth of blade, which is a thing. And we're also going to see that this guy comes in at, let's see here, coming in just under, well, at 2.5 ounces or so. So it is a pretty lightweight knife. So let's go on ahead and jump into, oh, I'm sorry, one thing I should mention. I have reviewed the Deka before, and I have reviewed, in fact, the Deka that looked almost identical to this with the Warncliffe blade. There are other blades available to you, by the way. But I reviewed it, and I gave some feedback. I said some negative things about it, and guess what? They changed them. So this is a brand new revision. This is an improvement on the original Hogue, the original Deka. And the big difference that you're going to immediately see is that there are 2 extra screws right here and right here on the original Deka. So if you're out in the wild and you're looking at a Deka, if you see 2 screws extra here, as well as a little plate in the back here, you're looking at a Rev 1. This is the Rev 2, and you probably want Rev 2. So, anyways, they are very similar, but they have done a number of changes, including a price hike. And so I want to do a full re-review and, talk about how I feel about the knife now with everything done. So, let's jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. So on the good side, to start with, it's made in the States. Look, for a lot of people, that's not relevant, but for some people, it is very relevant. Of course, quality is about effort rather than geography. But I really do believe that, hey, it's a nice thing. At least for me, it's a nice thing to cheer for the home team, right? See some manufacturing closer to me. It's a beautiful thing, but you're welcome to disagree. Anyways, there you go. Next thing, this guy is a fully ambidextrous knife. 10% of the population is absolutely going to love that because, well, you can flip the clip from this side over to this side with no problem. The thumb studs are accessible on both sides, and the lock bar, the able lock bar here, is accessible from both sides as well. So, there you go. It's a fully ambi knife. That's a beautiful thing. Next thing, this has a very, very nice amount of gription to it. You can grab onto this guy, and what you can see is this is not only a funky pattern, but there is actually, let's see if I can kind of show it off, but there is actually little diamonds of texture in here. This is something where once you grab onto it, you have a very, very firm grip. Not only with this finger groove right here, but also the gription here, also the gription from the clip. This, as well as the jimping up top here, you are not going anywhere on this. This has a very, very high friction grip to it, and as a result, actually using this and cutting with it, it is very, very effective. You can see I was doing some whittling with it the other day. Test it out. So that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, this guy has a very nice action to it, right? Even without a whole lot of break-in, this guy works quite effectively. It opens, closes beautifully. This has exactly the kind of action one might hope, especially from pretty factory fresh here, from a knife with this kind of sliding bar construction, as well as it is, by the way, pretty much dead centered, which is also a beautiful thing, with no blade play at all. So that's exactly what you want to see. Centered, no blade play, and a very nice free swing in action here. That's great. Next thing, this is a very lightweight knife. We already talked about the fact that this is coming in well under 1 ounce an inch, which is a beautiful thing. And I gotta say, the partial line of construction, and if you're curious what I mean by that, watch my disassembly, but you'll see that the liner ends about here. There's only, past this point, it's only G10. But given that the G10 is relatively thick, there's really not much ability to, like, can't do one of those things and pinch on it or anything like that. Relative to like well, there are lots of other choices out there where you can pinch them tight. This guy is very, very solid in the hand. So although it is only partial line of construction, it's done in such a way that it feels very strong and very secure, which is good. Next thing, this is still a reasonable value. The price has gone up $20 since my last review. This is now $140, but it's still made in the States. It's still 20 CV. It's still pretty well done. In fact, they made a number of improvements, so I feel like it still represents a decent value. Is it the cheapest knife ever? No, unfortunately, and they do keep, we'll talk about that later, but it is still a pretty reasonable value. And then finally, on the good side, they have made a ton of improvements here. They reduced the number of screws. The last one felt like a hardware store that happened to cut things. This guy is knocking that down a little bit. You've still got screw, 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 and then, the screws associated with the clip in there. But they have fixed that. They've also gone to a deep carry clip. Rather than having a clip that kind of comes down off the top here. And my other Deka, I forget exactly. I think that one might have gone up for charitable auction, or maybe I bought that one. Either way, the other Deka is no longer in my life, so I can't do the direct comparison. But you're going to have to take my word that the last one had a clip that was not deep carry, right? And so it carried much higher in the pocket, whereas this guy goes all the way into the pocket here. This is the only bit that should be sticking out, which is a beautiful thing. They also removed the clip plate on the other side, which knocked down the number of screws that you had in your life, as well as made it a little bit more ergonomic on this side because you didn't have extra screw heads sticking up here. The new clip, by the way, also feels ergonomically better. The last clip definitely was a pain in the hand actually using it, whereas this guy really isn't problematic, right? Yeah, you can feel that there's a clip in there. And certainly there are some other knives that grip my hand a little bit nicer than this, but at the same time, ergonomically speaking, this is pretty good to go. That's a definite improvement relative to the last clip. I mean, honestly, all of these things are improvements, right? And this is a nice reminder that iteration is the very best thing that a company can do, and it is the way to turn nice knives into gems. It is a very, very rare designer and very, very rare company that can walk up to the plate and just hit it out of the park right, at the first note. But if you're willing to go back, make some tweaks, release a revision 2, then boy, is it easy to make a great knife. So to me, it's not easy, but boy, is it easier to do it that way. So I love seeing these improvements, and they really have improved a bunch of stuff. So to me, all that's the good is all of these improvements. It is still a pretty reasonable value. It is lightweight with great action, lots of grip, fully ambidextrous construction, and it is made in the States. On the great side to me, the blade is still what's great here, and the blade here is made out of 20 CV, which is one of the very, very best steels out there in a pocket knife. I'm a big fan of 20 CV. It has a super thin tip. If we kind of take it out there and show you here, yeah, that's a very nice thin tip. We have a compound grind on it, where it is a little bit thicker back here, a little bit thinner out here. In practice, both of them are reasonably thin behind the edge by modern knife making standards, but you got a little bit more durability down here, a little bit more slicing power up here. You can see as I was whittling with it, I tended to focus out on this area here. It was just a little bit thinner. But yeah, that's great. And it has, honestly, it's just a really nice cutting machine, coupled with the Warncliffe style construction, which is very good for kind of draw cuts along things. This is just a real pleasure to use, right? As a blade, this is great. And the stock, by the way, is relatively thin as well, right? So you're not fighting really thick stock in these kind of cutting tasks. This is just a great blade. It really, really is. I don't tend to love compound grinds because, historically speaking, in the knife world, it was like we put an edge that was too thick with another edge that was too thick, but thinner. And it was just like, whereas this is reasonable. This is a more durable edge. This is a really slicey edge, and this gives you an option. So I really like this blade. I think it's great, and I think they've done a really great job, and it is the great. On the bad side, to start with, they have done a price hike here. It went from $120 at the time of my last review to $140. Now, I gotta be real with you. This next part here is not about this knife as much as it is with my frustration with the industry right now. I know that the supply chain is tough. I know that inflation is a thing, but it feels like the community is approaching a breaking point, and myself included, with all of the price hikes on these popular models. So I really hope that Hogue and other makers will take a very long and considered pause next time an accountant walks in with a pricing gun, eager to ratchet some stuff up, right? Because these $20 hikes have a huge cost both in community goodwill as well as hurting the the competitiveness of the products, particularly when overseas companies, by and large, aren't doing all that much price hiking. So I'm really frustrated here, and as an advocate for consumers, I feel like I gotta call that out. That's not a great thing. But I also acknowledge that the knife remains a pretty decent value, even at $140. So it's ugly that it went up, even though the knife was generally simplified, but it's not the kind of deal-breaker price hike that we've seen a bunch of times in other products, right? If they were to go higher than this, that's getting to be problematic. But I feel like, so I don't like seeing it, but they didn't do it so bad here. It is still an issue. One other thing that is worth noting is that price hike seems to have applied maybe universally, which maybe screams MAP to me, or manufacturer adjusted, or minimum advertised pricing, that's right. Ridiculous thing. But anyways, there are a bunch of version 1s of these still available and for sale out there in the world. Again, you're going to want to look for the 2 extra screws here, the little plate in this place here. And you're going to want to buy a version 2. Because oftentimes I'm seeing these version 1s at the same price, and the version 2 is strictly better, right? So make sure you pick up a V2 if you're picking up a Deka these days. And then finally, the only thing that's actually really about the knife here that is problematic is that it is a very controversial design, right? When I handed my wife the original one, she was very, very confused, right? This is a weird-looking knife. The compound grind, the peacock mascus here, there is a whole bunch of weirdness to this. It's not actually called peacock mascus. I think they call it G mascus, but it really does just look like one of those hydraulic press channels, except anyways, I'll let you fill in the blank there. This is very, very much a weird material, and it is a weird design, and it is unusual, right? It's an Elishevitz design, and Alan Elishevitz has done a lot of great stuff for the knife world, and a lot of folks love his work, but this is a piece of his work that I'm not sure everybody's going to love. And so, as a result, there is going to be a number of people who are going to look at this, and no price tag on earth could make this something they're interested in, but I think there are going to be some folks who love it. So, to me, that's what's bad here, is a controversial design. There are a lot of the version 1s still out for sale at the new version 2 price, and they have price hiked the knife, which I really just don't like. On the ugly front, given that they kept the price hike was almost ugly, but it's still an okay value as it stands, so there's nothing ugly here. Let's go to the final conclusion, which is that honestly, turns out when you take a really nice knife and you improve it, you get a nicer knife, right? Because it's built in the States. It's got full ambidextrousness, good grip, good action, nice lightweight, a price that's still pretty reasonable, even all things considered, and a ton of little improvements that add up to a much improved knife, and it has a very, very nice little blade. Above all else, this is a great cutting tool. Mind you, they did hunk the price up. Sure, let's just use a random word. They did hike the price up, or jump it up, I suppose. There are plenty of Rev 1s out there still, and it will remain a controversial design, but it is worth noting that with this iteration, the only remaining bad from my prior review is a matter of taste, that the design is going to be controversial. And that's a beautiful thing, right? When Hogue and other companies take feedback from the community and they make improvements based on that feedback, the knives get better. Right? And something that was very nice, well, frankly, the prior version was a really nice knife. This is really, really good. This is a really serious contender. This is a knife that you probably should be considering. And ultimately, I think it is a great choice. The Deka is a great knife with a great Wharncliffe-style blade. There aren't that many Warnies out there. By the way, it's worth noting this isn't a true Warnie in that there are these 2 angles to it here. But effectively, it has a lot of the characteristics of a Wharncliffe-style blade, even though there is that compound sort of one angle, then another one to it. So, but there are other fish in the sea, particularly if you're willing to hike the price up, that things get a little bit up there, right? So you are at $10 more than the Spiderco Delica, which has about the same amount of sharpened blade length, but is a little bit larger itself, but in the K390. And this is a very, very solid piece, so that's the thing. You're only $10 less, actually, now than the Spiderco PM2, which is sort of one of the greats, right? There's a lot to love about the PM2, and you're only $20 away from the Hogue Ritter RSK, which is a much more conventional design and a knife that I really, really like. And so I think if you're not loving the look of this guy, you might be more interested in this guy here, which is going to perform in a lot of ways pretty similarly, right? They've done a lot of the same good things here, although with some different approaches. Ultimately, I still think that your buying decision on this guy is mostly going to come down to taste. It's mostly going to come down to you look at this knife on the table and you go, oh, yes. Or you look at the knife on the table and you go, ew, no. And that's gonna be the decision. If you don't love the look, then don't buy the knife. There's a ton of solid competition out there in the world. But if you're liking the design, you're liking the features, and then honestly, it's a great knife. They've done a lot of really good stuff here, and the improvements have made this something that's really easy to recommend. So if you like the design and the features, then I can very easily imagine you carrying one of these guys for all of your tasks, including, the holiday decorating. Get it? When you deca the halls? Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting to you, that you don't deca me in the hallway for these kinds of puns, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.